Most people today think the world has lost its mind. People can't identify what gender they are, can't define what a woman is, and on top of all of it, we seem to hit a plateau of attitude that says, who cares? Well, we care, and have found a way to bring hope and definition back into this crazy world of ours. The Bible has always been an anchor for people who are adrift. And here on the Truth Barista, we are brewing up hope and making sense out of our disturbing times. The Truth Barista was designed for the everyday routine, encouraging your day with a cup of God's truth.
Where does the hatred for the Jews come from in history?
They are people who have succeeded an awful lot in the midst of other people who have not. Years ago, one of the Jewish organizations in New York asked me, what can Jews themselves do in order to minimize the hostility they face? I gave them a one-word answer: fail. Because as long as you succeed, you're going to be hated.
So the source is success.
It's not only the success, it's the success starting in poverty, as the Jews did in the United States and in many other countries. And so you not only see them succeed, you see them rise up.
They had a vision, and they worked their way up to eventually have the kind of influence that they have today. Now that they have this kind of power, you want to test a man's character, give them power. Do they use their power to make the world a better place, or do they use their power to bully others? That's a different conversation to have. But you got to applaud their community to work together, make money, and make it to the highest levels of all industries.
You're listening to the Truth Barista Show, where your steamy cup of God's truth is never empty.
Dr. J, we're in the anointed booth as always, and I'm just, again, excited about what we're going to talk about today. And I don't understand totally the accusations we're going to deal with, but you're going to unpack it and help us understand that accusations against the Jews are not founded, especially not in Scripture. So let's talk about it.
They are not founded in truth. And sitting in the anointed booth at the Erzatz coffee shop, I've had to have a triple espresso today because, frankly, my ire is up a little bit because I keep hearing this kind of garbage out there.
Yeah.
I see it online more than anything because many posters are unaccountable for what they say. Mm-hmm. And this particular thing came through a friend of mine. She works for a lady who's in a national radio ministry. That lady happens to be Jewish. And they get these responses because they are pro-Israel, pro-Jewish. They get these letters from people saying, well, what about this that the Jews do? And what about this, who the Jews are, and all that kind of stuff. And the interesting part is this lady, this friend of mine, her husband works for a ministry that is a mission to the Jewish people, to spread the gospel to the Jewish people. So this is very tense ground that we're walking on right now, very, very difficult ground. This is what came to her the other day that she said, what are my thoughts on it? So this is a lady writing on behalf of an 18-year-old teenager, okay? And this is anonymous. Quote, I'm trying to find a resource to explain to my 18-year-old the traditional Jewish heritage and beliefs. She is a deep digger into history. She questions why Jewish people are in such elevated positions despite their evil nature they seem to possess. And by the way, as I'm reading this just makes my skin crawl. Okay, going on. For instance, there seems to be a massive historic event wherever the Jews go. Why wouldn't you want a Jew on your side if you were an elite? She also talks about the involvement of the Illuminati, etc. She sees that the Jews have so much documented issues, I'm inserting, from biblical times, the Zohar, for instance, that really isn't shared with the common man. And I know this question seems random, but in her eyes, she sees death and destruction among Jewish leaders throughout history. Any resources available? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pick this apart in 7 sections here briefly. And the first thing I want to tell anybody who's listening in the booth next to us here, that when you start going online and you start doing deep dives into history, you have to realize that according to a recent survey, 60% of the stuff that you're finding online is just horse hockey. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just garbage.
Yeah, it's misinformation is what it was, what they were saying. Misinformation.
Yeah, and there is misinformation, and it is disinformation, and it is mal, meaning evil information. There are not a lot of safeguards on what's posted online, so it's not on the onus of the poster at this point because they're not going to pay attention to those guardrails. You, as the reader, need to understand the truth, and you need to have discernment. So here we go. First, Jews in elevated positions echoes a long-standing anti-Semitic trope that the Jews run the world, and it's been frequently used to justify Jewish persecution. A famous example of this, by the way, is the anti-Jewish propaganda piece called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Now, this was a fictional text from the early 1900s produced by the Russian secret police that falsely claimed that Jewish leaders were plotting world domination. Now, it's been debunked repeatedly, yet it persists in various forms today. It's often tied to exaggerated claims about Jewish influence in finance, media, and politics. The fact is, global power is shared by an extremely diverse group of people. To imply that the Jews control everything by being in elevated positions is horribly false. However, because education is highly valued among the Jewish community, it's not surprising that some Jews are high achievers in science, entertainment, economics, and every other realm of human endeavor.
But isn't that the reason, Dr. J? I mean, when you look at politicians, I found out the other day that Bernie Sanders, the liberal politician, he's Jewish. I mean, when you go down the list of people who are influential in all those areas that you mentioned, you can't help but walk away and go, huh? They're in control of everything. Look at the bankers. Look at Hollywood executives. Look at this and look at that. You can't escape it. They're there.
But the fault in that is it depends on where you put your focus. What about the other Jewish people out there who are great influencers on the right politically? Ben Shapiro, Gad Saad is another one that you hear out there. There's a plethora of other Jews across the political spectrum, but sadly in our wicked world system today, and because of anti-Semitism, they have the focus shifted solely on the Jews on the left, and they have the focus shifted on the Jews in their positions of power. But once again, the fact is if you look at the power base across the globe, the Jews are not the dominant cabal out there. They achieve like everybody else achieves, and you will see them in various areas. Now, there is one aspect of this. Because of persecution, many Jewish people in history past had to have professions that followed them when they were persecuted and driven from towns. So you had Jews who were involved in finance. Why? Because you could take money with you. They were involved in jewelry. And, you talk about the Orthodox Jews in the Diamond District. Well, because you could take your wares with you. What about tailors? Same type of thing. So entertainment, you can certainly take your talent with you there. So you look across the spectrum, there is a reason that you're seeing Jewish involvement in certain areas because of past persecution. So it makes perfect sense. But to claim that Jews are in elevated positions in order to influence the world, that is just a smear. That is focusing on one thing, blowing it out of proportion, and then creating a case out of it. So, moving on to number 2, the issue there was their inherently evil nature. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous that I even have to talk about this. But Jews are human beings along with the rest of humanity. And because of that, we all have a nature that's prone to waver between good and evil. To target the Jewish people as being particularly evil is the worst kind of smear, and particularly evil to say so. Therefore, a person should look in the mirror before accusing another of being inherently evil. Now, the good news is God has offered any person, Gentile or Jew, the gift of a transformed nature from inherently evil to being alive and aligned with God to do good. So if you want to accuse the Jews of having an inherently evil nature, you need to look at your own nature first. And then forget that accusation. Okay? It's humanity has an inherently evil nature that needs to be transformed. On to number 3. The assertion that no matter where Jews go, massive historical events happen. Now, that's kind of a really implied thing there. But having worked with these types of accusations, I know where this person is coming from, especially in the context of what that person already believes based on this woman's letter. It's to imply that they are causing those massive historical events. Like what? All you have to do is hang around on YouTube for a little bit and you find out Jews are being accused of actually starting the Holocaust against themselves to gain pity. You find that they were guilty of 9/11. The Jews have caused the crash, the 1929 crash and the Great Depression. They've tried to overthrow countries. All this horse hockey out there that's being spewed against them.
Well, and I know you're a prophecy kind of expert. Doesn't the scripture talk about in the prophets that wherever the Jews were sent, wherever they went, they were going to be not welcomed, not integrated into society? They're going to be problems. Doesn't the prophet say something like that?
That is true. And interestingly enough, it's their own prophets that God spoke through that said, if you violate my covenant, I will exile you out of the land and I'll put you into exile, which basically on the first exile it was to Babylon and back. And then the second exile in Roman times was actually started a global diaspora, dispersion of the Jewish people. And part of God's comments against the Jews was, if you violate my covenant to this extreme, you will be in exile and you're not going to find safety there because I have called you to stand out amongst the nations, to stand for me ethically, to follow my word and to do things the way I want you to do. And because there is a natural battle between the world system and God's system, the Jewish people representing God, and by the way, Christians representing God, this is why you see the attacks on Jews and Christians around the world. Christians being martyred, Jews being persecuted. It is really a spiritual battle that's taking place. It's not because the Jews have brought it upon themselves and wanted to bring it upon themselves. It happens because it's a spiritual battle, but God is ultimately going to remedy that. So let's talk about this number 3, this historical event thing. The undertone leads us to think that Jews somehow have this grand ability and this awesome organization to control the entire world, and that those in power need to buddy up with a Jew or the Jewish cabal to shape world events. The scope of that idea is so ridiculous. It's so large it's to be ridiculous. Who can do this? Seriously, who can do this? I mean, we talk about the elites today. We're talking about the World Economic Forum. Oh, they're this grand cabal. Well, guess what? They're collapsing. Schwab is leaving. The World Economic Forum doesn't have the power it does. The World Health Organization doesn't have the power it used to have because the United States has withdrawn funds from it. So we're talking about these grand global elites. Are there grand global elites that control economics, that control politics? Yes, there are. But to claim that they're all Jewish is really a total anti-Semitic smear. So let's forget that one, okay? Let's squash that one. And this is part of, it actually aligns with number 4. Jews aligned with the elites, which is the implication that the Jews are part of an elite, secretive, evil cabal, specifically the Illuminati. Now, are the Illuminati real? I have no doubt that they are an offshoot because it's documented. There was a group, or is a group, called the Illuminati that were formed in the 1700s as an offshoot of Freemasonry. I get it. Are there elites doing terrible things today? Yes. Are there secret societies around the world perpetrating evil and wickedness and pushing it upon the world, really trying to propel it through the world system? Yes. Just like God has his representatives and missionaries and emissaries advancing his kingdom around the world. But let's deal with this secret society thing. The belief that Jews are somehow in charge of a global elite secretive evil cabal such as the Illuminati is both ridiculous and slanderous, again, reeking of the protocols of the elders of Zion. In truth, history has proved that it is not the Jews, but those in power generally, which, by the way, includes Gentiles and Jews. Let me just focus on the Gentiles here, that the Gentiles in power who are looking for scapegoats to persecute, to cover up for their own power grabs and crimes, have targeted the Jewish people. So, by the way, it's like, oh, it's not us that are doing this. It's those Jews over there that are doing this. A classic example, Hitler. Oh, it's not me grabbing for world power. It's those Jews. And I'm saving the world by protecting the world from the cabal of those wicked, dangerous Jews who are spreading like octopus tentacles around the world. You look at the Nazi propaganda. And there were the pictures of an octopus with a caricature of a Jewish face with tentacles stretching around the globe. I mean, this is that type of slander that's popping up again. You'd think with what happened with the Holocaust, what happened with Nazi Germany, what happened in the pogroms and the protocols of the elders of Zion, that this kind of garbage would fade away with rational people. Nope. It's popping up again today.
Well, and it's because Revelation 12 tells us that it's Satan who hates the Jews, and he hates Christians because we're a part of that whole thing.
Part of the family, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, he's going to bring it back again and again and again. That's what he does. He's the accuser of the brethren. He's going to find ways to accuse them because he wants to eliminate them, not just put them in their place, but actually eliminate them.
That is an excellent point, that Satan is the accuser of the brethren. Now, in our scriptures, that's addressing, meaning the Christians, Jews and Gentiles who believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But God still has a plan through the Jewish people because his covenant through Abraham with them is unending. It is eternal. Now, that's separate from the new covenant by which we find salvation. But again, because the Jews and the Gentiles are God's representatives on earth, called to be so, even though we all fail in that mission, okay, sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail. Because God's hand is upon the Jewish community and the Christian community, Satan is going after them. So this adds an interesting point. If somebody joins others in slamming Christians and Jews with false accusations, does that mean they're actually on Satan's side? You want to talk truth about evil and wickedness? There it is, right there. We're moving on. Number 5. This was a little bit awkward in the translation, so to speak, from the letter, but she says that so much has been documented from biblical times, the Zohar, for instance, that really isn't shared with common man. Okay, what she's basically sharing is they're keeping secrets. They've written these mystical books, and in these mystical books has their plans for world domination. And there's these really weird things going on in the darkness with the Jews, and we need to be suspicious of it. Okay, let's talk about this. This belief holds water only if the person ignores history and focuses on an esoteric book of Judaism that focuses on Jewish mysticism, all right? Even within Judaism, some rabbis teach that mystical writings like the Zohar should not be studied until the student is thoroughly grounded in the clear and open truth of the Torah and accepted commentaries of the community of rabbinic scholars. And even if one decides to read the Zohar, it is not secret. I went on Amazon. I found about 20 different translations and publications of the Zohar. It's not hidden. It's out there for anybody to read. On the other hand, you have publications that are like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and some of these other anti-Jewish books that are kind of secreted and passed around, and they're even out there for publication openly. Everything she's accusing the Jews of is the same thing that the other side is doing, and this is a very classic thing that goes back to the previous point. People often accuse others of what they themselves are doing. So as to this whole accusation of keeping writings and thoughts and philosophy secret, doesn't hold water because it's out there. However, for the person who is a true student of history and the scriptures, you need to get to that first before you start diving into this ridiculous crapola that's out there on the internet. And by the way, this also has to do with Christians. I'm going to pick on, for a little bit, the charismaniacs. I'm not talking about the people who are spirit-filled and who practice biblical spiritual gifts or spiritual gifts biblically. I'm talking about the charismaniacs out there who are putting special revelations and experiences above the Bible or in place of the Bible. There are Christian mystics who have gone off the rails, okay? So this is all over the place. And by the way, if you're going to accuse Christians and Jews of having mysticism that's gone off the rails and work detriment to society, why don't we start talking about the other religions as well? Why don't we talk about humanistic philosophies that are calling for the depopulation of the earth and these types of ideas? It's all over the place because it's fallen humanity. Number 6. Death and destructions. She notes death and destruction among Jewish leaders throughout history. Now, I'm not sure what she's implying here, per se. Is it that Jewish leaders cause death and destruction, or that there is death and destruction among Jewish leaders throughout history? I think it's the first that she's talking about. So let me address that. If the person is implying that Jews bring death and destruction to wherever they go, that person saying that is blinded by the worst kind of deception and prejudice. There is nothing in the historical record to back up such an absurd claim. To the contrary, much death and destruction has been visited upon not just the Jewish leaders, but the Jewish community as a whole. Has this person forgotten the historically documented Crusades, the pogroms of Russia, and the German Holocaust? Or are they purposely ignoring these events in order to make their point? I mean, this is so ridiculous. It's mind-blowing that this person says, oh yeah, they're wreaking death and destruction wherever they go. Are you kidding me? The Jewish community has just now reached the levels of population in certain parts of Israel as pre-war Jewish communities were in Germany and in Eastern Europe. So yeah, don't talk to me about death and destruction. The Jews know this all too well, and the world would do well to embrace the Jewish community and to really work to make amends and comfort them because of that. And finally, let's talk about number 7, sweeping generalizations. Quote, massive historical events wherever the Jews go throughout history. Oh my goodness. If this point of view is truly held by this young person, that demonstrates, again, an unfair and prejudiced view of Jewish people. So I would suggest that the person not only study Jewish history, beliefs, and views from reliable and well-vetted sources, but connect with groups like Bridges for Peace. And by the way, here's the website, bridgesforpeace.com, all one word, bridgesforpeace.com, because they've worked with the Jewish community to build bridges between Christians and Jews in order to bring the truth forward and to begin to bring reconciliation between the two sides of the family so that Jews and Christians can stand together against the kind of garbage that we've been addressing today. And sadly, I don't think this is going to be fully solved until Messiah comes. But in the meantime, it's up to us Christians to stand alongside the Jewish community to fight this type of garbage and to get the truth out there.
Well, very well put, Dr. J. You know, you wonder where all of this stuff comes from in this young person. It has to begin with his or her education, where a lot of the education, as you said earlier, it's misinformation, it's disinformation, which means that you deliberately eschew the facts, or it's
malinformation.
Malinformation, yeah, which is just all-out evil. So that has to come through the educational system, that Jews are terrible and bad and evil. I mean, it just, how come we don't pick on, let's just say, and I'm going to use the term Polak.
Yeah, the slander and yeah.
You know, but that they don't seem to hold on to that vitriol that comes with the Jewish accusations. There's more than just, well, I don't like the Jews. I mean, it's like, I don't like the Jews and they shouldn't be around. I mean, there's something different about how we hate Jews, right?
Well, and once again, it gets back to Jew hatred basically has a spiritual root. And by extension, because Christianity grew out of Judaism and serves the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because we do that, we are also the targets of this spiritual attack. And it's funny, you used the term against the Polish, you know, when I heard all these terms from my grandfather growing up. That is an ethnic term. It's not a spiritual term per se. Mm-hmm. And so ethnic is different than spiritual. And spiritual is where the attack, the battle is primarily lying at this time. We really need to be fighting against this type of stuff. What really blows my mind at this point is on college campuses of the Ivy League. These are supposed to be, you want to talk about elites? These are the elite educational institutions in the United States. And yet, they are so stupid, so ridiculous, either they are ignorant, which belies their claim to elite academia, or they are outright deceived, or they're just outright evil, that they would promote anti-Semitism on their campuses by promoting the pro-Palestinian causes, because the pro-Palestinian Hamas and these other groups are completely anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. They want to clear out the land of Israel from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, that is an anti-Semitic death call to clear out the Jews from that land. And by extension, it means to kill all the Jews. I'm ashamed to admit, as an academic myself, that these colleges and universities, with their claim to the highest levels of academia, would put up with such incredible nonsense. In fact, in my mind, I look at Harvard, Yale, these other groups, Columbia. It's like, you guys are idiots. You have lost your credibility. You have now become a bastion of stupidity, a bastion of total irrationality, and frankly, a bastion of spiritual darkness, which is a shame because many of these Ivy League schools were started by pastors.
That's right.
And have given into the world culture and the prince of the power of the air and the rulers of this present age. And so this is why we're seeing that all this anti-Semitic stuff takes such a strong hold on these campuses.
I think that God confounds the wise, and I think the more we look at it, the more stupid it looks, the more idiotic it is. But here's the deal. All this idiocy is going to continue to influence the world to the point where our prophet Zechariah says that, every nation is going to come against Israel at some point in the future, and they are going to have no friends, no support whatsoever. So it's not going to stop with the universities. It's going to influence nations to the point where they will hate Israel so much, they will try to eliminate her. Correct?
That's the world system against God's coming kingdom. That's the way it is. But even though it seems to be bleak as far as prophecies go, what's coming, that doesn't relieve Christians of the responsibility and God's assignment to love everybody. That's primary, but especially to love the Jewish community, which means we don't accept everything that Israel does and every Jewish person does carte blanche. I mean, if there's wrong being done, that needs to be called out, needs to be addressed. There's accountability there as well, just like the world and anybody else has the freedom to hold Christians accountable. Are we living up to our profession of faith? Are we living up to our leaders' standards? That's fair. But, or I should say, and as Christians, we have the responsibility to stand up for our brothers and sisters under the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to be able to stand with them in the day of battle until Messiah arrives. This war, this battle, will not end until Jesus returns. Until that time, we fight hard, we need to be rational, we need to be wise, we need to be biblical, and we need to be reflecting Jesus' character as we move forward in this fight. And we need to educate. That's really important. And again, I refer anybody to bridgesforpeace.com. You want information on Jewish history that's true and well vetted? That's a place to start right there.
Well, Dr. J, you have your own education online, and if people sort of say, I like this Dr. J, he's really special, he's even got a sense of humor occasionally.
What?
Occasionally. There's a little bit, yeah. Anyway, if they want more information on this topic or other topics that you have educated us on, where do they go?
I'm glad you asked. highbeamministry.com, as in car, high beams, because we are shining the light of God's truth on the road ahead, meaning we want God's truth to be learned and lived in a believer's life. highbeamministry.com. Go there for podcasts, for publications such as blogs and books. I address these types of topics and across the cultural genre, so to speak, plus biblical topics that you might be wrestling with. So go to highbeamministry.com. Take your time, explore. We have over 450 podcasts available for you. So go to highbeamministry.com, and thanks for listening.
The Truth Barista is a listener-supported ministry that depends on the gifts of listeners like you. Please consider a gift to this Christ-honoring ministry today. Please include the station call letters. Or if you're listening online, go to highbeamministry.com. That is highbeamministry.com. While you're on the website, check out all the ministry resources that are available. The blog, the Cruising Through the Bible commentary series, online classes, and don't forget to subscribe. We want to keep you informed about all the new series that we create for radio and the podcasts. Remember, we like feedback, so send us an email at highbeamministry.com. The Truth Barista, teaching God's Word as truth for faith and practice. Join us again next week for a cup of God's truth on the Truth Barista.